Lexi was trying to drown out the voices in her head. "What was the point of doing all of this? Why do you keep going back? Is it worth the pennies you make?" She shook her head, trying to silence the voices. "Not today. Please, I just need to get home." She quickly reached for her bag. Relief shot through her as her fingers curled over the smooth curves of the headphones. The only good thing Lexi got from slaving away for pennies were the headphones. She saved up for the longest time. They were her only means of relief and joy. Time to silence the voices with the rhythm and beat of her favorite songs. As soon as the music started playing, Lexi felt a million times better. Nothing in the world could distract her now, not even the thoughts of her sadistic boss or the creepy people on the bus. The music seeped through her, calming every nerve in her body, and a sensation of weightlessness rolled over her. She was finally lost in the familiar sounds. The bus ride home went by in the blink of an eye, and before Lexi knew it, she was unlocking the door to her tiny apartment. Lexi never cared about the state of her apartment. She could be in a little hovel without heating. As long as she could escape in her music, nothing else mattered. She was swaying her hips and rocking to the music flooding her head. She always preferred the soft humming of instruments and melody to anything else anyone could ever say to her. She didn't need friends, a lover, or even family. Lexi locked the door behind her, dropped her bag, and kicked off her shoes, not caring where they fell. She stepped onto the cold tiles and enjoyed the feeling of her toes having a bit more space. She loved wearing heels and the sound they made while walking on the cobblestone paths and trying to walk to the beat of her music, dancing her sorrow and despair way. Lexi never had a care in the world about who might be watching her or that they thought she was crazy for dancing. The music always took over. Lexi was slowly removing the shackles of work, the tight skirt and terrible blouse all the employees had to wear. As she freed herself, she dropped them where she stood, her heartbeat synchronizing with the music. It wasn't just Lexi's heart beating to the rhythm of the music. There was another, in the shadows that had followed her from the bus station. He was mesmerized by her body and movement. For weeks he'd been following her, never daring to talk to her, but today he was going to take the leap. His eyes were pinned to Lexi, and just as she was lost in her music, so was he, lost in her movement, smell, and bliss. He will never forget the moment he saw her. Well, he heard her approaching before he laid eyes on her. Her footsteps landed on the cobblestones to a rhythm that was unmistakable, clear that she was making music with every step she took. She was wearing her massive headphones, hips cheekily swaying, and the most beautiful grin on her face made him fall head over heels for her. He was always accused of feeling too much too quickly, and all the women he pursued never ended up feeling the same about him. But he immediately knew that she was going to be different. She will never escape his mind or his embrace once they are together. Lexi dropped onto her bed, feeling the cold sheets against her skin. She took a deep breath and closed her eyes. Finally, I'm alone. But she noticed a strange smell. It's been a few weeks since she last washed her bedding, but surely that wasn't the smell. She couldn't quite put her finger on it, but it reminded her of her mother. Cigarettes. She didn't smoke, but her mother was a chain smoker, and Lexi could never escape the stale smoke smell, regardless of how many times she'd washed her clothes and bedding. She always smelled of smoke. She made a promise to herself to never end up like her mother. She pushed the thoughts away. She was not in the mood to bring up any painful memories. Not today. Not now. Just listen to the music and let that clear your mind, she told herself as she tapped her feet to the beat. He had to fight the temptation to follow Lexi to her tiny room. He knew he couldn't risk her noticing him, not yet. He closed his eyes and visualized her laying on her unmade bed. He made a mental map of her tiny apartment. He sneaked into her building a few times before, but never while she was home. And he knew that today was the day. They will be together soon. Lexi always played her music extremely loud, and if you were close enough to her, you could hear the soft hum of the music. He was lost in the sound of her breathing and the distant hum of the beat. He knew that she drifted off, the perfect time to step out from his hiding spot in the corner of the bathroom. In one step, he was in her miniature living room. One more step and he'll be able to look into the tiny bedroom. Lexi's apartment wasn't much bigger than a shoebox. She clearly didn't care about decorating the place or even buying anything new. The only thing she contributed to this tiny place was a set of light gray bedding and blacked-out curtains. Lexi was fast asleep when he stepped into the tiny room looking at her. She was relaxed and did not have a care in the world. He's been closer than this to her before. A few times she sat next to him on the bus. She always smiled up at him as he walked through the aisle towards her, and she shoved over to make space for him on the seat. She was always so inviting with a gorgeous smile on her face. But he's never seen her this happy before, sprawled on the bed in her an ivory silk slip caressing her soft skin. His heart skipped a beat. She was breathtaking. This is true love, he thought to himself. He knew exactly where to step to ensure the boards did not creak under his weight. He slowly made his way to her. His fingers floating just a few millimeters above her, he could feel the heat radiating from her skin. A rapid tap on the door knocked him out of his daze, and his breath escaped him when he locked eyes with Lexi. Time stood still as he looked into her bright green eyes. He smiled at her, and in a beat of a heart, all went to hell. Lexi's eyes took a second to register the situation. She was pulled back to this world by a strong smell of cigarette smoke creeping up to her nose and the loud knock on the door. She thought she was imagining it, but at the foot of her bed stood a giant figure blocking the entrance to her room and hovering over her. She tried to push herself up, but the shadow was so much faster. She wasn't even able to move her arms, and he was pinning her to bed, his giant hand clasping over her mouth. The stench of smoke filled her nostrils, and the taste of blood seeped through her mouth. He leaped onto the bed, trying to keep Lexi from screaming. He didn't even think twice and immediately clasped his giant mitt over her delicate face. She just needed to remain quiet for a little while, till the person at the door stopped knocking and walked away. He was on fire as soon as he felt her soft skin under his hands. One hand cupped over her beautiful mouth and the other grasped her arms. He placed his full weight on her to ensure she didn't kick or knock anything over. He didn't want her to make a noise, otherwise the person at the door wouldn't stop knocking. She was jolting her tiny body violently. He was taken aback by her strength. She was putting up a real fight, unlike some of the others he surprised before. But he always knew she was special and that they would be perfect for each other. Lexi tried to escape from the shadow, but he was so strong, and his weight was crushing down on her chest. She was struggling to breathe. His giant hand was clasped over her mouth and blocking her nose. She felt her chest tightening and her heart beating so hard it felt like it would break free from her chest. Her lungs were on fire, and terrible pain radiated through her torso. Lexi heard the faint bumping, not sure if it was someone knocking on the door or the shadow's heart beating loudly. Darkness was creeping into her mind, fear fading away. She surrendered to the dull darkness, and just like she did every time she listened to her music, she followed the rhythm to a calm place. His mind was racing 1,000,000 miles a minute. This was turning out to be such a perfect day. How did it change so quickly? He had countless dreams of feeling Lexi's skin on his and looking into her eyes, but this isn't how he imagined their first encounter to be like. If that fool at the door would just give up and walk away, he would be able to talk to Lexi and explain the situation. They might even laugh about it when they tell their children about this funny story. It felt like a lifetime before the knocking on the door stopped, and Lexi also calmed down. She wasn't fighting him anymore. He knew that she sensed that he wasn't a threat to her. Maybe she felt the same about him, love at first sight. He lowered himself and placed his lips on her forehead, a soft kiss landing on her damp brow. He whispered, "I'm going to remove my hand from our mouth. Please don't scream." He waited for her to respond, but she just remained quiet, which he took as her understanding of the request. He slowly lifted his hand from her mouth. Her beautiful, full lips were pale, with the only color on her face being a thin stream of blood smeared in the corner of her mouth. He immediately felt guilty. Maybe he was a bit too rough with her, or maybe she bit her lip. His eyes were running up from her lips to her eyes, but they remained closed. "Lexi, open your eyes. Please look at me. I can explain everything." He closed his eyes and thought that when he opened his, she will be looking up into his eyes, and she'll see they were filled with love for her. She will know that she's safe in his embrace. He took a deep breath and slowly opened his eyes, expecting to see her bright green eyes looking into his. Rage boiled in him when realized she refused to open her eyes. "Lexi," he uttered in a rough whisper and clasped both her shoulders in his giant hands and shook her. "Lexi, please just look at me. We are safe. Don't worry about the person at the door. They're gone." Rage escalated. She wasn't listening to him. Why is she so rude? Can't she hear the sincerity in his voice? Before he could even stop himself, he felt his hand lifting and landing on her beautiful cheek. I'm sorry, Lexi. If you only listened to me and looked at me, I wouldn't have had to do this to you. Now you are going to have a bruise on your lovely face, and it's all your fault. He leaned down and kissed her cheek, which he just slapped. As he pressed a tender kiss to her soft skin, he realized that she wasn't responding to his touch. Why is she so still and cold? Fear seeped up through him, and he started to panic. Lexi, my love, please open your eyes. He looked at her with his eyes darting around. He noticed that her headphones still cupped her right ear. Maybe she was lost in the music. He reached for the headphones and removed them from her head. He held his breath, expecting her to open her eyes, but she remained still and stiff. Tears filled his eyes, and he lifted his giant hands and looked at them. I only covered your mouth for a few seconds, he told himself. And he looked at her pale face. I didn't do this to you, Lexi. I would never hurt you. If only you listened to me and kept still, why did you have to put up such a fight? Why does this always happen to me? He whispers to himself. Why don't they listen to me? We hope that scared you a little. Remember to subscribe, and check out Creepy Midnight Stories for more.